Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining Sonic Insights Medical Corp for this webinar called Scope Forward. The future of GI is now in your hands. I'm Angela Kuliris, Director of Marketing for Sonic Insights, and I'll be moderating this webinar today. For those of you that aren't familiar with Sonic Insights, we are a health technology company that has created an accessible, affordable, and accurate diagnostic solution to improve patient care for those with fatty liver disease. Today, you'll hear from entrepreneur and healthcare futurist Praveen Suthrum and gastroenterologist Dr. Bradley Sklar, who will discuss the trends shaping the gastroenterology industry, and they'll share insights and practical advice for growing your practice. We're pleased to have Praveen and Dr. Sklar with us today. First, a few words about our speakers. Praveen Suthrum is an entrepreneur and healthcare futurist. He co-founded Next Services, a company that helps healthcare businesses thrive through better operations and technology. He also co-founded Novo Liver, a company that helps reverse fatty liver disease through weight loss. Additionally, he runs a digital mastermind program for gastroenterology leaders. Praveen has been featured by various media outlets, and he's also authored books that have transformed the space of gastroenterology. Our second speaker is Dr. Bradley Sklar. Dr. Sklar is a senior partner at Digestive Disease Medicine. He joined the practice in 1993. He's also an active staff member at 2 other medical facilities. Dr. Sklar holds his license to practice in the state of New York and is board certified in both internal medicine and gastroenterology. He is a member of the AMA, the AGA, the ACG, and the Medical Society of New York. He has completed numerous research activities and co-published several articles. Thank you both for being with us today. Thank you to those in the attendance as well. Please note, there will be a Q&A session after the presentations, and we invite the audience to submit your questions at any time via the Q&A feature on Zoom. I'll now turn it over to Praveen to kick off his presentation. Praveen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Angela. I want to start first by welcoming all of you again and commending you for joining this presentation today. Just by doing this one simple act, you've set into momentum something about your future. It signals that you want to take control of your future and you're actively thinking about the growth of the practice. So I want to congratulate you for that. So let's get started. Over the next 15 minutes or so, I invite you to see the future of gastroenterology from the lens that I'm seeing. And my own thoughts and ideas have been shaped by various initiatives. Of course, you know me because of these 2 books, Private Equity in Gastroenterology and Scope Forward. But I also run a show called the Scope Forward Show, and it began during the COVID period, where I've had conversations with numerous GI leaders, and some of the things that I'm sharing today have been shaped by these conversations. More recently, the GI Mastermind, which has several GI leaders as part of it, it's a small close-knit group. We're actively talking about what do you do with the future of GI. And again, they've shaped my thinking as well. So let's go back to 2012. And I want to share with you a story. So this is me sitting in a Google self-driving car back when it was a research project. So behind me, there was a laptop and there were wires that were running behind the steering wheel. All the auto companies at that time dismissed it as a research project because it was one. But I want to draw your attention to the gray device or gadget on top of the car, and that is called as the LiDAR scanner. Now, what is a LiDAR scanner? So it rotates 360 degrees and it acts like the vision of the self-driving car. It is watching the road all the time. We can afford to blink, but the scanner never blinks. Now, back then, that scanner cost about $75 $1,000. And I'm sure you must be wondering, why exactly are we talking about self-driving cars and what is the link to gastroenterology? And you will find out in just a moment. So take a look at how things have evolved with the self-driving vehicle for Google. It's now called the Waymo, and take a look at it from this year. They're in version 5. So that black thing that you're seeing on top of the card, that is the LiDAR scanner now. And today, the Lexus, which was a Lexus, now it's a Jaguar. And the self-driving car company is called Waymo. And Google calls it the world's most experienced driver. And the reason that they're able to say so is because with every single mile that any self-driving car drives in its system, the entire system learns. And that's an important distinction that I want you to remember. The LiDAR now shows up inside of an iPhone 12. And if you look at this, you may wonder, why does a phone require a LiDAR scanner? Because the phones have evolved too. And this has augmented reality and applications, and that requires similar capabilities. So if you notice, the LiDAR scanner is shrinking. It's doubling in productivity or efficiency, and it's also dropping in cost. So what are we talking about? If you see, it was $75,000, and right now there are startups like Luminar that are working on selling it for as little as $500, so that every car can have its own LiDAR scanner, and potentially every car can become a self-driving vehicle. If you look at what we are talking about, we're talking about exponential technologies. And what exactly are exponential technologies? These are advanced technologies such as AI, machine learning, digital biology, synthetic biology, 3D printing, sensors, ingestibles, and there are plenty of these advanced technologies that are doubling in performance and at the same time reducing in cost and even size. What you're seeing on screen on the left is the Kodak digital camera. That's how it looked. And for those of you who may not be familiar, the digital camera was first invented inside of Kodak. But the scientist who invented it, he could make it see the light of day because his bosses shut him up because it would disrupt the chemicals business. Because Kodak was into the film business, they were making money on film. And eventually, as you all know, Kodak went bankrupt. Now, how did the technology evolve? You see on the top right, there is a device called the Insta360. It's available on Amazon, and there are plenty of similar devices. You can put that on a selfie stick, and when you're biking, it takes 360-degree videos, images, and everything. And like with most devices and equipment these days, it also has AI inbuilt in it. It connects to the cloud and so on and so forth. Again, observe this curve of exponentials and pause for a moment and ask yourself, what you're seeing on screen is exponential or not. This particular device or company or organization or service, whatever this may be, back in 2008 was selling zero, and there was a long quiet period, which is very typical of exponentials. In the beginning, self-driving cars made no noise, and everyone thought it was all research. And then come 2015, you have them selling 11,000 units, whatever these units are, and then it's 40,000. It more than doubles, then 100, then 230K, then 1.7 million, and last year it was 3.5 million. What are we talking about? I'm sure most of you can guess this logo or this ad. Of course, it is stool DNA testing, and which has disrupted GI, is disrupting GI, but a lot in gastroenterology. A few years back when I first wrote about it, that this is oddly reminding me of self-driving cars. A lot of people dismissed it and said, look, colonoscopy is the gold standard. Yes, it is the gold standard, but if you look at exponentials in action, they improve in performance all the time. So I'll not be surprised if this improves in sensitivity and specificity as we go along with more and more data. But it is just not about Cologuard or one company. There is plenty coming at the GI practice, currently. And we're talking about four big trends which we cover in Scope Forward, and let's go over that. The first one is exponential technologies, which we just saw. The second is consolidation. Third is big brothers. And fourth is patient behavior. So exponential tech is not just about Cologuard, but if you look at that space of digital biology, if you can call it so, you have Freenome, which is heavily venture funded. They're in liquid biopsy. You have Guardant, which is a public limited company. They're also in liquid biopsy. And these companies collectively, and there are many others, they're not going after screening one cancer. It's not just about colon cancer. They're talking about 15 different cancers. So if and it's not even a question of if, it's when this becomes a reality. So you're going to have a technology that would screen multiple cancers at the same time. How would you compete with that? It's something for you to consider and think about. Sonic Insights, which is sponsoring and hosting this webinar, I would say they themselves are an exponential technology. They've taken a complex product of liver scanning and then converted it into a portable device, and they've turned the business model in its head. And that's amazing. Like, so that again is an exponential technology. Let's move to consolidation. And I'm sure all of you are all too familiar with it in whichever region you're logging in from. Back in 2019, when the private equity in gastroenterology book came out, had made a prediction that there would be about 8 to 12 uh, private equity GI platforms. And today, that is a reality. Now, if you want to know how I guess the future, it was simply because I saw over the shoulders of other specialties like dermatology, because the investors who invested in derm are also investing in GI. And so their thinking and behavior is quite similar. So going by the trend, there's going to be more consolidation that is going to come at gastroenterology. And it is just not restricted to private practice. If you think about why are practices consolidating in the first place, whether it be through private equity or not, it's because the health systems in the local regions are consolidating. They are getting bigger and they perceive that to be a threat. So this becomes one of the many options. There are practices that are also consolidating without private equity, and they're using the strategic partner route, and that is also in the works. The third trend is big brothers. And here we have four big brothers, not just one. We have big health systems, we have big insurance companies, we have big tech companies, big technology companies, and big marts like Walmart. So let me give you a few examples here. If you consider United Health Group, we know them as an insurance company, but the fastest growing division within United is not insurance. It is their provider arm called Optum. And they are today the highest employer of physicians in the country. So if you notice what is happening, they're building an integrated health system and they're expanding and they have plenty of capital. Now, if you think about the different health systems in the region or in any region, some of them are beginning to offer insurance plans as well. How they're thinking is that, I got to dominate my local region. And so I'm going to acquire private practices. I'm going to offer insurance plans, and I'm going to expand. I'm going to buy up other hospitals in the region. And then I'm going to cover this entire local area. That's how they're thinking. Big tech companies, they think that, look, the healthcare guys don't know how to do technology, and they've got it all wrong. They're broken. The way to fix it is applying the right tech. And if you guys give us your data, we're going to write the algorithms and make sure that we can help you get more efficient and correct the entire system. That's how, whether it be Google, Facebook, Microsoft, any of the technology companies, they all want a piece of the healthcare pie, and definitely gastroenterology. And Walmart started its own health centers and they're expanding. What stops them from offering everyday low cost colonoscopy? You never know. And then the final trend of patient behavior. And this is a trend that us in the healthcare industry, we think that we know all too well because we're dealing with patients all the time. But this is a big disruptor in the entire industry because the wave of digital health is expanding from this direction. Let me give you a few examples from GI and beyond. Consider the company Mahana Therapeutics. Earlier in February this year, the FDA authorized them for a complete digital therapy for IBS. And so patients can use their digital platform in order to manage their IBS condition. Consider Oshi Health, which is a company that has now pivoted to become a telemedicine platform offering GI services. Consider Bold Health. They're a digital GI company from the UK, from London, and they're now coming into the US. And again, they want to offer everything that a private practice offers, but it's going to be all digital. Like, so these are fundamentally new business models for gastroenterology. And now a different example, consider Calm. I can take a bet that for the physicians in the audience, many of your patients are perhaps using this app to fall asleep. They may be using this app to manage their conditions, their chronic GI conditions like IBS. And if you think about it, what is the business rationale and why does it show up under patient behavior? They're using it because we are not able to offer it within the healthcare system. The patients are paying these apps and other technology companies with their money. And today, Calm has got a valuation of $2 billion. And that actually trumps all the private equity activity that's happening in gastroenterology. So, when you're thinking about your future, I invite you to think from the context of these four trends and see them at the same time. So back in 2019, I gave a talk in at the DHPA in Chicago, and back then we talked about the trends that were happening then. We talked about all these different trends from artificial intelligence, microbiome, and I've added private equity consolidation and liquid biopsy and big tech and telehealth sense. Now, back then, when people asked me, where exactly is GI as an industry on the exponential curve, I would point to where you see the red dot. But then here's what happened during the COVID period. These are all the announcements that happened during the pandemic. There are several companies that are creating quite actively, even as we speak, a new industry that I would call as digital GI. Let's take some examples. So you have at the bottom left a company called Topography Health. They raised $5.85 million, not too much money, but they did raise money. But their important, interesting thing is their first focus area is to create a digital clinical research platform for NASH. And, that is interesting. Now, Novo Liver is a company that I'm involved in, and we created this entire platform to reverse fatty liver disease by 10% weight loss. And this entire business was created like an exponential business model, virtually and digitally throughout the COVID period. The founding team met digitally. All the fundraising happened digitally. The entire technology platform, we use Next Services to build the tech platform for Novo Liver. That happened digitally. And most important, our customers are digital, and we reversed fatty liver for different people using a complete virtual approach by meeting them where they are at their homes. Now, these are fundamentally new business models, and in one way or the other, they're going to shape or reshape how we do medicine or how we deliver care in gastroenterology. So right now, if you think about it, COVID accelerated all the trends that were already taking shape. And here's where we are. So the red dot moved several notches up. Now, finally, I want to show you this slide to hit home this point, because we're talking about the future and we're talking about it also from a digital standpoint. On the top is Gastro Health, and they started in 2006. And in 2016, they took capital from Audax Private Equity. They were the first ones to get started with PE in gastroenterology. And then they grew, and they grew well. There are over 270 providers right now, and they exited in 2021, exactly in 5 years. So that's the second bite of the apple. And they sold to a Canadian private equity company called Omers. And they, from what the news reports say, they are expected to have been valued at mid 900 million. So let's say 950 million. And then at the bottom is another company called Forward Health. What they've done is they're a startup, and they are in the space of primary care, and they've created new offline and virtual and at-home business model, and they are a subscription service. But the important thing is they're going after the same patient. They started in 2016, and in 2021 they raised $225 million, making their valuation $1 billion. In a recent talk that I gave, a physician in the audience said, you're comparing apples to oranges. One is a GI practice, and the other is a digital health venture. And my point is exactly that. They may be different, but they're going after the same patient. And if you see this from the lens of the patient, they now have a choice. They can go to a gastro health or a GI practice. They can also go to a Forward Health or an emerging digital GI company or venture. So I want you to take home this point from a technology standpoint when you think about the future. I want to finally end with a couple of messages. The first one is the future really depends on the quality of our questions. Now, in the last 10, 15 minutes, if you've been listening, and one aspect of you, would be like, hey, all this disruption is coming. And if the question that you ask is, how do I be safe? How do I protect myself from this disruption and my practice? You will get those answers, because our mind is very capable of giving the answers that we want. But it is the questions that we have to focus on. But if you ask a different question, saying that, hey, this disruption is coming and this is exciting, how can I use this disruption as the very tool to propel me forward? Then you'll get fundamentally different answers. And that's what I'm here to urge you to do. Ask different questions so that you can start shaping gastroenterology on your terms. I want to again finally end with a story. And this is a story that I remind myself often whenever I think that change is not possible. There was a frog in a well, and then one day a lark stopped by. The frog was very comfortable in the well. It was dark, it was cozy, it was exactly what it wanted. Finally, the lark and the frog started having a conversation, and the lark said, look, frog, the sky is vast and there are plenty of things out there. But the frog says, no, no, I know that the sky is round. In fact, if I sit in the middle of the well and look up, it's exactly circular. So I don't believe you, the sky is round. And then this argument continues, but the Lord tries explaining, look, there are beautiful stars, there are actually billions of stars. There are oceans, there are rivers, there are trees, there are plenty of other animals. It's vast out there. But the frog is determined to say that, look, I know it, and the sky is round. Finally, the lark gives up and flies away, and the frog dies in the well. So, so I remind myself the story every single time that I do not want to be a frog in the well. So with that, I just want to invite you to deeply think about your future, because it is really in your hands, and you can do it on your terms. Approach it not out of fear or not out of a mindset of scarcity, but an abundance mindset. It's a fantastic future out there. It's just that we must think differently. So thank you so much for having me, and I'm happy to talk to you more during the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Praveen, for that window into the future and for your ending story. That was great. I'm looking forward to further discussing the trends that you brought up in our Q&A session that'll start shortly. In the meantime, I'd like to welcome our second speaker, Dr. Bradley Sklar, to share his insights with us. Dr. Sklar, the floor is yours.
So I'm a senior partner at Digestive Disease Medicine of Central New York in Utica, New York. And our practice opened 39 years ago, and I joined the group in 1993. We consist presently of 8 board certified gastroenterologists and 9 mid-level practitioners, nurse practitioners and PAs. And we're the only large, all-encompassing, full-service, single specialty group in Central New York. Our practice motto has always been to strive to provide the best clinical GI care in Central New York and to serve as a center of excellence for GI in New York State. Next slide. So now I'll start with a question, and well, really it's a theoretical statement by the late Yogi Berra, the Yankee catcher. If we don't know where we're going, we won't know when we don't get there. So just think about that. Next slide. The problem is that traditional procedures alone did not offer the income that practices need to remain financially viable. I was the 6th doctor in the group when I arrived in the scene 28 years ago. And I was at the time skilled in performing all the GI procedures. I can do upper and lower endoscopy, ERCPs, and consultative services. But I had no training whatsoever in running a business. And back then, a gastroenterologist could function independently by doing consultative services, doing upper and lower endoscopies, usually at local hospitals. Our practice had an extra advantage of that we owned our own equipment and scopes, so that we sort of controlled the marketplace there. But in time, the costs of running and operating the business were rising year after year, while reimbursements stagnated or declined with every revenue cycle. The result is that GI doctors now had to work harder and harder to make substantially less income. And unfortunately, this truly has led to dissatisfaction in our field, with doctors now feeling burned out, taking early retirement, and even, as Praveen alluded to, selling their practices to investors and hospitals. Next slide. The solution is to increase the offering of ancillary services and embrace new technologies. And if you look at this slide, this is the Mohawk Valley Endoscopy Center. We opened 10 years ago, and since then, we've now performed over 100,000 procedures in those 10 years. Next slide. At Mohawk Valley Endoscopy, we offer the ancillary services of anesthesiology and pathology. We have a board-certified anesthesiology team with an attending and CRNAs. And we also have a board-certified pathology doctor plus our own pathology lab. This allows us to get direct communication to the board-certified pathologist and to look at the slides ourselves and have an adequate discussion. And it also obviously allows us to bill for those services. Next slide. We've since expanded our regular digestive practice in the office to include radiology with a board-certified radiologist who works for us. And we offer CAT scan, ultrasound, and fibroscan, which actually is similar but not as good as what we're going to discuss later, as you all know, with Velicure. But these are the services for radiology that we offer as ancillaries. Next slide. In 2003, we adopted the new technology called capsule endoscopy. This was a technology that was born in Tel Aviv, Israel, and I brought the technology up from New York City, where it was being used. It's basically a patient swallows a capsule the size of a vitamin pill, and inside that vitamin pill is a wireless camera that is then transmitted to a belt recorder. The camera takes 40,000 pictures during its journey through the GI tract, and then the images are downloaded either to a laptop or to the internet, where you can send the video of the small intestine anywhere in the world to be read. Next slide. 10 years ago, we began our ancillary services with infusion therapy, whereby our IBD patients can now receive the latest comprehensive biological agents and advanced IBD therapies. And we have a 5-chair infusion therapy going every single day with a nurse. We have 1 to 2 RNs who man that. Next slide. Recently this year, we began clinical trials. Here we partner with industry to offer the latest diagnostic and treatment modalities. And our practice is the only practice in all of the area from New York City to Rochester, which is upstate, that offers clinical trials. Currently, we have 6 clinical trials going, 3 where we're doing blood testing to check for whether or not there are colon polyps or colon cancer, which Praveen alluded to earlier. We are doing a celiac trial looking at blood markers to see whether or not that can predict celiac disease or treatment of celiac disease. We're also doing a clinical trial for new biologic therapies, the JAK1 inhibitors for Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. And then finally, we're in the process of doing a trial looking at how endoscopy and burning the small intestine can cure diabetes. And then for the future, where this will tie in nicely with Velicures, we're looking at clinical trials of some of the new NASH drugs. I knew Praveen alluded to some of his using diet to treat this, but there are new drugs coming out this year, in fact, that are scheduled to treat NASH, and we're doing some of the clinical trials, and we hope to use Velicure to help us with that. Next slide. The benchmark of gastroenterology, of gastroenterologists who do colonoscopy is what's called the adenoma detection rate. And that's the percentage of precancerous polyps that you find during colonoscopy. And we're proud to have an ADR of 48% in my group, which is about 23% higher than the national average. And yet still we're trialing this new technology called GI Genius in August. And this is a company, this is Medtronics, this company, and what they're using is facial recognition and artificial intelligence to aid in the detection of colon polyps. And if you look at the slide, you'll see that little triangle, that little square box over that little polyp. And using that facial recognition technology, it should aid us in finding more polyps. So then one might ask the question, with our ADR being as high as it is, and there's currently no reimbursement code for this, why on earth would we even do such a venture? It's time consuming and everything, but we feel that this is a practice enhancement of our brand, and it will let us continue to operate and maintain our group as a center of excellence for New York State. Next slide. And now we'll give the shout out to our Sonic Insights crew here who are sponsoring us. But we started Velicure in June of this year, which, as you know, is a non-invasive technique using sound waves that go through the liver to measure steatosis or fat and fibrosis. And what's great about Velicure is not only is it portable, like Praveen said, it's completely non-invasive. It's about 1/10 of the cost of an MRI, and the technology is on par with MRI elastography in terms of accuracy. Next slide. So the very core of our practice took a full turn. We went full circle. In March of 2020, as everybody knows, with the COVID-19 pandemic, we had to close our doors for direct patient care for the most part. And in order to remain open, we had to start something that we had never used before, which was telehealth. And I'd like to tell you that we went from 0% utilization of telehealth in the beginning of March 2020 to 90% utilization of seeing our patients by June of 2020, which is an incredible increase in our use of technology to maintain our practice. Next slide. And so our journey then has taken us on quite a ride in these past 39 years of our practice. And at times, I'm not sure any of us would have predicted where we were precisely going or where we'd exactly land in the future of GI, as Praveen alluded to in his talk. But by embracing ancillary techniques, ancillaries and new techniques, we feel that we're at least headed now in the right direction. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sklar. And that was a great case study of being in the trenches, as you called it. It's really great to see how your practice is embracing innovation to remain financially competitive in the GI space. And I definitely saw some alignment there with Praveen's talk. We'll now start our Q&A session with our two speakers. For those of you in attendance that haven't had a chance to send us a question, please do so in the Q&A feature on Zoom. And as Praveen mentioned, the future depends on the quality of your questions. So hoping we see some good questions come through. So let's get started. I'll start with Praveen. You mentioned the 4 big trends that are shaping the GI industry. Is there one particular trend that you feel is leading the pack in terms of disrupting the GI space?
No. They're all coming at us at the same time, and that's why I chose to put all 4 trends on the same slide, because when we look at one trend or the other in isolation, we tend to narrow our focus, and the entire industry, if you think about it, I did a little game in one of the talks recently, and which was I had the audience vote on what's on their mind, and it's very clear. I didn't need the vote. I knew because it's the insurance companies, it's internal issues, it's private equity, and that looms large. And then there's Cologuard, if there is time, you think about Cologuard. But then there is this whole slew of other things which are coming at gastroenterology. And for example, nobody worries about what Google is doing with endoscopy images. What are they doing? And they've put a paper out there, but it's too far out for us from our purview to consider that. So again, all 4 trends are important, and we must look at it at the same time.
Thanks, Praveen. I'll now turn it over to Dr. Sklar. So based on the trends that Praveen has outlined, which one resonates with you the most and why?
Well, I think this idea of technology replacing gastroenterologists is just not ever going to take full hold, because there's always a role for a clinician to interpret the tests, and and the clinicians have to put context into the new technology. Otherwise, it won't work, and it won't be beneficial for the patients. So that's the main thing I would say.
Okay, great. Praveen, I'll go back to you. Based on what you've said and all these great insights that you provided, what will it take for GI practices to thrive in the coming decade? What do they need to do?
Excellent question, Angela. So the first thing is to take stock of where you are, and that is the most important step. So when you take stock of where you are, then naturally, you're going to go through methodically, like, Dr. Sklar did in his talk. It was very methodical. He went through step by step all the different ancillaries, and I'm sure a lot of thought went in before they started any of these ancillaries. So just taking stock of where you are, first step. Second step, getting educated. Because, what if digital is the new scalpel? So the question to ask is, what will you do with it? It's not about whether it's coming, not coming, whether it'll disrupt. That's maybe it'll come, maybe it won't, maybe it'll disrupt fully, maybe it won't, maybe partially, whatever. But it's an opportunity, and you can take advantage of that opportunity, provided you understand it and you learn about it. So the second step is education. Third is developing an independent view of the future after knowing what it's going to be like. You don't have to follow the herd. Just because everybody is following one approach, you don't have to do it. You don't have to approach it out of fear or just because your neighbor is doing it. If you develop an independent viewpoint, then you know what's your point B. Then the fourth step is to go figure out the different ways. There are different ways to go from point A to point B. Figure out what's the right way for you. So that's what I'd say.
Wonderful. Thanks, Praveen. Yeah, definitely some methodical approach happening there. Dr. Sklar, you gave us quite a few great examples of how your practice is looking at things differently. Where do you see your practice in the next decade, and do you see it changing more?
Yes, we do. I mean, with all of the new medications and all of the new technologies, we always have to sort of keep everything in mind. And as I was saying in the talk, you just have to embrace it, because if you fear it, or if you are opposed to the new technologies, you're going to fall behind and you won't provide the best service. I always felt that the best way is to look at all of the data of a new product, and if it looks good, we should always try it, even if, again, it wasn't a direct reimbursement, because we want to stay the best for our patients to be the best practice.
Great. Praveen, how are you seeing GI docs responding to the trends or changes that you've outlined? Are you seeing a lot of them adopting this advice and these insights?
Very well, actually, Angela, because one insight that I get is from our mastermind group, and they're phenomenal GI leaders, and I can see how they're responding, and what they're doing with the knowledge, with the information, and they're already taking action. I won't be surprised that by the time we finish, if some really exciting new initiatives start from just people interacting with each other and accepting the future, talking about the future, and doing something with it. So that's one aspect of insight that I get. The second one is, look at all the headlines from the COVID period in digital GI. Like, it was amazing to put it all together and see it in one slide. And I was looking at that and saying, hey, like, the industry is really changing. It's not one off. It's not one company here, one startup here. But the important thing is there is a lot of capital that is being deployed. Technology is one thing, but a lot of money is coming into the system, and that's going to get more people, more resources to work on it, and that is what is going to cause momentum.
Okay. And speaking of COVID, you both talked about COVID accelerating these innovative trends in your practice, Dr. Sklar, and overall in the industry, Praveen. Let's talk a little bit about how you're inspiring action within your own practice, Dr. Sklar. This is a lot of innovation to take on over the past few years, and more innovation coming. How do you inspire that action with your team?
Again, we want to be progressive, and I think doing clinical trials really opened the door for us now to really be on the front lines with the new techniques and new technologies, like this idea that you can cure diabetes with an endoscope, that you could cure NASH with a pill that has to be looked at that's never been done before. So some of the new innovations in drugs and different technology modalities, things like that, are all exciting. And I mean, it makes us look forward to it. I mean, if you're afraid of it, and some of the doctors that creates burnout also. And you just, I think if you take a positive approach to it and evaluate it, and it looks like a good technique, you should try it out. And if you have to offer it as a clinical trial, or if it's FDA approved here in the United States, we could use it on patients right away.
Okay, thank you. Fatty liver disease is definitely something that's top of mind for many of us around the room here. We know that it affects about 100 million Americans. The prevalence is quite large, and it's an emerging health crisis. So Praveen, maybe I can ask you, what opportunities do you see in the GI space when it comes to fatty liver disease?
Um, look around the market, right? Like, so let's look at it in different ways. One is clinically, you have for every 10 patients, at least 4 of them with potential fatty liver disease because they're obese. How do I know this? Almost 50% of the country is obese. So there is a high chance of prevalence. You do a hepatic steatosis index calculator, as simple as that. You will know whether there's prevalence of NAFLD. So when you do that, these patients are walking in and out of your door every single day, but you don't have a solution. You can't do anything with them. One thing that we do is we say exercise and eat right, and then come back and see me in 3 months or 6 months, and then they do that. That's one angle. The other is you can put them on a clinical trial, like Dr. Sklar has been talking about. That is great. But what about all the missed ancillary opportunity, even if you view it from a business standpoint? Like, so these are people who are coming into your door, but you don't have a solution to offer. So it is vast, and that is just the US. Now, if you expand to the globe, we're talking about 1.75 billion people who unfortunately have fatty liver disease, and it's not stopping. It's going to keep expanding. I want to narrate an anecdote to dispel a myth that we all had, including my colleagues at Novo Liver, pre Novo Liver, and we dispelled it for ourselves now. Very strangely and interestingly, during the COVID period and quite unexpectedly, we started the company in 2 different countries, US and India. And guess where the company made its first dollar? It happened in India, because India has high prevalence of fatty liver disease too. So I have my team co-founders sitting in Michigan and making money from a different part of the world. So it again breaks the myth that we require insurance companies only, and we have to be tied into the managed care system only. And if they say jump, you jump. If they say run, you run. No, you don't have to. I think you can create a market. And that's exactly what I'm urging the audience to do. Think very differently and think broadly. If other startups and other companies can make money in different ways, then why can't you? So summarizing a response to your question is, it's vast. The problem is vast. We need more energy, more people working on it. So yeah.
Thanks, Praveen. Dr. Sklar, maybe we can continue on that same train of thought with regards to fatty liver disease. You touched on it during your presentation. And what are the opportunities that you see for your practice with addressing this market?
Well, it's a really, like Praveen said, it's a huge problem in North America and the world because of the obesity problem. But I mean, especially now that we're able to get rid of hepatitis C and hepatitis B in many cases and suppress hepatitis B, fatty liver and NASH have now become the #1 cause for the need for liver transplant, which is a very expensive endeavor, as you know. So there's a huge market then to do intervention. And in my experience, we always ask the patients to lose weight and exercise. And unfortunately, maybe 5% of the patients do this like adequately enough to get any real change in their fatty liver or NASH. So now we have to think of other things. And it's frustrating as a clinician until now, because we didn't really have great markers to tell us until MRE came along, and now we have Velicure as a diagnostic modality. So it's great to have something like that because it's a huge volume of patients that you can help. So from an economic model, it works also. But it really is a great non-invasive technique that's should be embraced by the insurance companies because it's so much cheaper than an MRI. And for us to get an MRI elastography, the patient has to drive 80 miles to get it. Here, I can have a portable machine in my office. I didn't even mention the convenience of it to our patients. So I just feel it's a great way to do the diagnostic workup of the patients, and it can follow people over time. So I really think it's a terrific technique. And then looking forward to the future, again, we have the potential of new drugs being launched to help people. And if it if they're successful like it is for hepatitis C, then we'll make a huge breakthrough. And I also see Velicure being used to monitor those patients who are on drug therapy in the future, like in the next year or two.
Wonderful, thank you. I have a question from the audience here around reimbursement. How are payers influencing innovation through reimbursement? And maybe Praveen, do you want to try tackling that one?
Payers actually, to be fair to them, are influencing innovation. So one thing that they're moving towards, as we all know, is value-based care. And why are they interested? The answer is simple. They want to reduce cost. So they're in the business of either delaying payments or not paying at all. And the physicians in the audience, would resonate or understand that from a revenue cycle management perspective. So from their standpoint, it's always better for their business model if they are able to pay out less. How do they pay out less? By keeping actually people healthy. So if we figure out ways to keep patients out of the hospital rooms, then the payers make money. So the question is, how do we facilitate that? So if the GI practices begin this conversation, there are groups in the country that are doing it, right now, is engaging the payer in a conversation and saying that, look, how can I save you money? And let's talk about the patient pool. And if I can save you money on the whole pool, then we can both share the savings. And that's the business model for Sonar MD. For example, Dr. Larry Kaczynski's company. So they are focusing on chronic conditions and making sure that people don't end up getting them serious. Like, so that's what. So examples of value-based care will take off, and the payers are supporting that.
Great, thank you. We've got a couple minutes left, so I'm just going to ask you each one more question, which is there one thing you'd like attendees to take away today from your presentation? Maybe I can start with Dr. Sklar.
I'm going to just ask one question for Praveen before that. Again, the reality versus the theory, because so far we have not seen, unfortunately, the insurance carriers reimbursement towards prevention, like and reward that type of using technology to make patients healthier. That's an ideal situation that they should do, but so far in the trenches that hasn't happened for the most part. Again, something like with artificial intelligence, like I mentioned about the polyp detection. Same thing. I mean, we're going to be saving the insurance companies money because if we find polyps earlier, it's going to prevent colon cancer. So the thought would be that they should have a code, because it's an expensive technology, say, to deploy. But up till now, they haven't done that. So I just wanted to clarify in the trenches. I don't think that's happened yet much.
Yeah, no, I agree. Just to comment on that, New York is a very fragmented market, and it's difficult to engage them. But what I learned very recently, and this is as of last week or the week before, state of New Jersey, they're doing it, and they're engaging in a conversation on NASH, and how can they help reduce the prevalence of it. And if that data can be shared, if you can demonstrate, I think the key word is, can I demonstrate to you? If you share your data, can I demonstrate to you that I can save you X amount of money? So it will happen. It's just a factor of time as well.
So now,
final words, one more minute.
Final words. I think the field of gastroenterology is healthy. I think it's vibrant, and I think that as long as physicians aren't afraid to adopt the new technologies and we actively seek them to help our patients, I think the future is bright in gastroenterology.
Thanks, Dr. Sklar.
My final words, Angela, is physicians are some of the brightest people on the planet. And there is a revolution that's happening in healthcare. It is changing. And if we accept that change, and if we learn what we need to do in terms of business and technology, those are the other circles that they need to know about, like, so the great clinicians. But now this is table stakes. You got to know where tech is going. You got to know where business is going. And you can pick it up. But if you do, then you got to lead. So you must lead, not take the back seat. Just because you don't understand it, you understand it and then lead this revolution to digital health, because nobody cares about patients more than their physicians. And that's not going to change. So thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. We've reached the 1 hour mark, and I want to say thank you for giving us a window into the future. And in the trenches, Praveen and Dr. Sklar, it was an honor to have you both on today, and lots of learnings and takeaways for the audience, I'm sure. We hope you'll join us for our next webinar, so see you soon. Thanks everyone for joining in today.